What's up, guys? Welcome to Appropriate Culture. I'm Brandon Rouge. Today we're talking with Arlando Smith. He's an actor, writer, man of magic, and also my brother. So really excited to have you on the podcast, Arlando.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Nice, yeah. I know, I guess it kind of seems like the pandemic's kind of winding down, but it's been an incredible year and a half with all that's happened. And so yeah, I just kind of want to talk about life, about your experiences as an actor, as a writer, as someone who does freelance work. And you actually are the person who got me into doing promotions and working promo events, which is actually how I met Lucas. So technically you're responsible for the Appropriate Culture even existing.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie and say I didn't consider that before we began, because I know that Lucas is part of this. So I was like, what is my relationship to these people before I walked in the room? And I was recounting, I was like, oh, I met Lucas when Brandon was working a promotional gig. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This is funny. Yeah.
And yeah, you also got Lucas his house or his apartment in South Seattle, essentially, which is where we started planning Appropriate Culture. So on multiple levels, you're kind of almost the godfather of Appropriate Culture.
I'll take it. It's fine.
So yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy year and a half. And just how are things going with you right now? What's going on in your world? Are you still living in downtown Seattle?
Yeah, I still live in downtown Seattle. And yeah, that's where I am and will be for the near future, considering some other points, but I frequently consider that. That's nothing new. Hard to keep me pinned down to any one place for too long. But this past year has been good for pinning one down.
Yeah.
And it's been good to me, actually. I know a lot of people have found this year to be very challenging in many ways. And I can say that it has been challenging for me, but I also feel that it's been overall really clarifying. I have a few mantras from this past year, and a big one is obstacles are vehicles. And we've all had lots of obstacles this year, and but those are challenges, right? Challenges don't mean that they're losses or problems. They just mean there's something to interact with that can also make you strong. So I feel like this past year has really done that for me.
Nice.
So good.
So you are an actor by trade, and I also am super interested and admire and proud of you, your work with Teferi, the Time Bender. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Or maybe explain who Teferi is?
Yeah. So I'll start with the acting part, and then we'll move into that one segment.
Cool.
Before I say anything else, we can always go to arlandosmith.com if you're listening or watching.
Nice.
And that will explain what I'm about to.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
But yeah, so I started acting, professionally, when I was 18, my first job. And so from there, off and on, in and out of school, debating whether I wanted to do it, then going to grad school ultimately for it, and that being pretty traumatic for me. And then stepping away from it at one point, then coming back to it, and stepping away from it again before I moved to Washington in the past 6 years, and then finding it again in the past 3 years. So and along that journey, and this is important for what I guess I'm about to say, whenever you're an artist, whenever you're creative, whenever you're a parent, and I consider that to be the same thing, you're the author of another entity, whether it's something people read, listen to, experience. Another human being is, a sum of what came before. And parentage is a big part of that. And the same thing goes for being a creator. And so that kind of winding journey that I described, along the way, I've picked up a few things like working in the marketing world, which influenced my family in order to survive. But that at the same time is just an extension, I believe, of my communication skills and my acting ability. I consider myself a storyteller first. So acting actually comes under that. Storyteller is the big umbrella.
Yeah, word.
But acting is the one that I have the most experience with and comes easiest. Doesn't mean it is easy. There's a difference. But it comes easy. And so that said, along the way in the past, I grew up loving fantasy and fantasy fiction and games of all kinds. Our earliest memories together are playing video games and collecting card games. I know you had your favorites from back in the day. And one of the games that I fell into was Magic the Gathering. And I avoided it actually when it first came out in the mid to early 90s, because I knew I'd be doomed. Like I knew it would just be like all my like collecting Magic game, fantasy, war, all of the buttons got pressed by this game. And everything was very, very high level. Everything was as good as anything else out there for the most part. So I stayed away from it, which is a habit I've learned of mine, self-preservation. But sometimes, the thing you avoid is the thing you most need, or the thing that you're calling for the most, rather. And so I got into it through a few friends of mine when I was living in Los Angeles around 2009, and they kept pushing it my way, and I was like, okay, I'll play it. And it was great. And it was fun. Yes, I know I like this game. And then I was at PAX in 2012 with Eric. And we ran into a coworker of his. Eric is our brother and our father's name and our cousin's name. But I was with Eric, our brother, and his coworker had a pack of Magic 2012. And on the front of this was a particular foil card called Eva, Nature's Herald. And I was like, that's it. I'm in. I love her. I need this card. I need this card in my life. So at that point, I started playing and becoming more serious. Fast forward, to applying to work at Wizards of the Coast and them saying no, thank you. Me moving to Seattle for various reasons to get closer to you and my family and our father and the kids who are in the family now who are new. And a big part of that was the Magic the Gathering community, which is huge up here because Wizards of the Coast, who makes Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons, is based here. So I that became a huge subset of my friend life, like my social life, really a big chunk of it, because so many people here play games and it's a giant viable endeavor on a Friday night. Which is where I'd be at the shop playing Magic, something called Friday Night Magic. So over the course of this time, people were like, you kind of look like this guy in this game. And I'm like, I'm a Black man who plays Magic. You guys need more points of reference, okay? But they came out with some artwork and it looked just like me. And I was just like, well, wow, okay, well, I guess, yeah, that is a thing. So then fast forward to the pandemic, and I'm at home, and you can't play every Friday at the shop or hang out with your friends in the same extent. So there's a man who I follow on YouTube whose name is The Professor, and he's the #1 YouTuber on for Magic the Gathering outside of Wizards of the Coast themselves. He's got 600,000 subscribers or something.
Oh wow!
And so I followed The Professor for a few years, and he's just a smart, kind, informative guy who just talks about Magic, the state of Magic, state of the gameplay, what's new in the world, card boxes, card sleeves, all the paraphernalia. Like The Professor covers it all. He's your information resource. And at the same time, he also is very, very good about raising awareness about good causes. He's raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for things like the Trevor Project and trans youth and all kinds of things to help people. And he's done that. So after George Floyd was murdered last year, he was on the front line saying Black Lives Matter.
Mhm.
There were some people who followed him was like, Professor, you need to stay out of this. Why can't you just stay in your lane? And, and Professor was like, you can politely, pardon my language, fuck off, Black Lives Matter. And I was like, I love this guy. Like,
yeah,
he's amazing. And so someone, however, was like, well, Professor, you're saying all that, but there's no Black people on your show ever. There's no Black people working behind the scenes ever. So what's that about? And he did something which I absolutely think is critical for anybody who was in the same position, who's been called out for whatever. Own it. He's like, you're right. I need to do better. Please get at me, BIPOC and content creators. I really want to work with you. I want you on my show. So I had a podcast at one point for 24 episodes centered around Black and brown people in pop culture and nerd spaces. And so, and I also resemble Teferi. So I posted on his post, like, hey, get at me. I'm perfect for your show. And like 100 strangers over the internet, long thread were like, yeah, look at this guy. He's like Teferi. And oh my gosh. And I was like, oh my gosh. And the professor's going to reach out to me and this is going to be so cool. I'm going to be on his show. And it didn't happen. He didn't reach out. I didn't have anything going at that point for him really to latch onto to produce. So at that point, I was just like, well, you know what? I should just do it myself. I should just make it myself. I have time. As an actor, my shows had closed. All my work I had work lined up through this February, and that was all wiped out, a year's work. And it was going to be one of my best years as an actor. And that was all gone. So I had time to imagine and create. So I reached out to our former roommate, Catherine, who has a custom clothing shop, she's an amazing designer and clothier. And I asked her, and she pointed me in the direction of some other people who could build props. So over the course of, I think from July to December, I worked with 3 people, a leather worker, a prop maker who built the staff, and Catherine who built my wardrobe, paid them all, and finally made this outfit. And so thus the wizard was born, and it looks amazing. It blew my mind. I almost started crying when I put it on for the first time, because I never really saw a wizard look like me in my life.
Yeah, right.
There's only old white guys with beards, and those are great too. But I didn't realize how impactful it would be to see myself be a character who is a wizard. That was really gratifying. My Discord is going off, so I'm just going to turn it off.
Oh yeah, you're good.
So yeah, it was really, really powerful. So at that point, I knew I had something. I knew at that point that this would be greater than just, maybe working with a professor or putting on a costume. I knew that it was emotionally relevant, which is a hallmark for my life of something that I need to attend to and put my energy to if I am struck by it.
Yeah, and especially like right now, where I feel like society is actually waking up to realize. I mean, it's been happening for years, but like especially the last couple of years, that we don't have Black role models. The same. It's like there might be like bad guys in movies and stuff, or like very specific like typecasts or like types of heroes, but it's usually all like violence and like. Just not, just Black and brown people are usually not portrayed in a very positive light, and then not like, definitely not in magic, like, or like wizardry.
You don't see too many Black wizards. You see a lot of warriors.
Yeah, exactly.
People who exercise their physicality to have impact on the world, which is incredibly valuable. And analogs would be Black Panther, who is kind of like the Superman in that he is mind and body. He's a well-rounded individual, which makes him sort of the king. But Teferi is a mental athlete and a mental soldier, and he exercises his will through his magic ability and his mind. And that is something, that you don't see a lot of representation in with Black people or people of color. So that was really powerful, and it's really wonderful and that's kind of how I identify, in my life. So it's really nice to see that. So then fast forward, you know part of the story, but I guess your audience might not.
Mhm.
So I need pictures, and you know, I gotta announce my presence to the world, and the goal transformed from just having a platform as this wizard character who I identify with in so many ways, who has been so self-fulfilling in so many ways, to that of pursuing Wizards of the Coast in another light,
Mhm.
and with the goal of being this character in anything that they may produce. You know, I want to be the voice in the video games. I want to be the voice in any upcoming TV series or anything that they do, any ad. It should be my voice. I have the, have it all.
Yeah, yeah, you have it all.
so and so getting them to see that, I needed photos, I needed the internet profile. So I wanted to reach out to our dad, also named Eric, who is an amazing photographer. And so I managed to pin him down and get some photos with some doing. And we went out to an area, a beautiful area in Washington, Deception Pass, to take some photos. And we did that. And as it turned out, someone had seen us and they had posted us to Reddit. And because they're like, Teferi's, you know, this is the Magic subreddit, so a Magic forum. And Teferi's out here in these streets or in these beaches or whatever. And it blew up. It's, I think, the biggest post in the Magic subreddit as far as I can go back.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
8,000 upvotes, which was crazy.
Nice.
And so I found, my friend messages me like, "Hey, you blew up on Reddit." And I got home. I had to create my Instagram profile and my Twitter profile. And you were around that weekend, and you helped me
Mhm.
with things. And I filmed a video where I called out the professor because he made a video way back that called out Teferi for some madness. And so it snowballed. It erupted. Like it happened before I even wanted it to, which is
Mhm.
great. So,
Yeah.
and I wasn't on Twitter or Instagram to any degree before. And I created the whole social media engine, you know, because that's currency that we live in. That's the
Yeah.
currency through which your audience will find this.
Yeah, and we'll put the links in the description of the video
Yeah.
and the podcast, and then we'll also some pictures of your costume,
Oh,
so people
cool.
can
Yeah,
see.
actually. Yeah. At Teferi Magic on Twitter, at Teferi MTG on Instagram.
Nice.
You can start there. So, and those things are all on orlandosmith.com. But yeah, so summing up, like that happened, and that video that you helped me shoot, I did this little
Mhm.
rinky-dink video on your phone targeting the professor, and he reached out to me right after, and I'm happy to say that last month I shot a video with him, and it was just he and I, and you know, we're sitting at like 70,000 views, which is really wonderful. And
Yeah.
he's an amazing, kind man. And were it not for his post, in part to call for Black and Brown content creators, I wouldn't have done it then in this way. So I'm
Mhm.
very grateful to him um, for that. So that's the journey of Teferi. And to that end, I got to shoot that with him, which was a wonderful full circle moment. I shot a music video this past weekend in association with some people at Magic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Teferi's going to be rapping, and
Nice.
and that should be out the end of the month. I shot a video with Card Kingdom, the largest retailer for cards and video games. That should be out next week. My own
Nice.
video is due to drop tomorrow, 6/16,
No, cool.
2021, that I shot, hired a cast and crew to show off my acting chops that I produced and
Nice.
outsourced and worked my butt off in order to do. And that will be out very soon on my social media. So yeah, I'm going to make an appearance at Mox Portland, which is owned by Card Kingdom. They're hiring me to do that, and
Oh,
that's
wow.
July 10th for their grand opening for their Portland store.
Nice.
And I have world premiered a Magic card, Mythic Rare Dragon, which is super nerdy and cool for the entire world, which is really nice, courtesy of Wizards when they sent that over to me. And I think there'll be more in the future.
Nice.
And yeah, so they've been in contact multiple ways, and we are moving closer and very closer to our goal. Tomorrow being a big day, hopefully, when this launches. So this video.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's all huge. And yeah, I mean, I just love, I mean, I follow you on Instagram and Twitter, and yeah, I just love seeing your posts. So yeah, anyone who's interested, we'll have those links in the description. But yeah, maybe in some point in the future we could have Teferi on the podcast.
Maybe, yeah. It's funny. I no one knows who I am. Like Arlando, no one knows that guy. They will tomorrow because I'm gonna appropriately credit myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I keep my work as a performer, as an artist, discreet from my identity. And I learned that through some trauma that I had.
Mm-hmm.
People identify with their work,
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay. But it can't be all that defines you.
Yeah.
And so I've been very careful to separate Teferi from Arlando and create this whole fun persona, especially during the pandemic where there's a little bit of magic and whimsy in the world,
Mm-hmm.
as if I just touched down and I couldn't have asked for a better introduction the way it happened to the world. So that veil is being lifted. I'm gonna, show the cogs behind the wheels tomorrow. But
Nice. Yeah, and one of the coolest things that I like about Teferi is that it's not really like cosplay. It's not like, oh, I'm dressed up as Teferi. Like you, when you're Teferi, like you are Teferi.
yeah. No, I mean that's a good thing about acting. So that's the acting part, like I'm a good actor, and
yeah, you're a great actor. Yeah,
I'm trying to work and get better. Thank you, I appreciate it. And I take a lot of pride in what I do in a humble way, in that I want to be the best that I can be, and I want to maximize and use that ability to its fullest potential. And I think this character is an opportunity for that. So I really try
nice.
to put my work in.
Nice. So yeah, so let's talk about acting.
Yeah.
I'm curious, kind of about your take on like the state of like theater and stuff right now. But before we get to that, why don't you tell me a little bit about, or tell us about your journey as an actor? Because I mean, I know
Sure.
a lot of it because you're my brother, but I'm sure there's some stuff I don't know. And then
Sure.
yeah,
No, I'm happy
there's
to talk about it.
yeah, I feel like like you said at the beginning, like obstacles like really become what make you stronger and kind of like define your path almost in some ways. So yeah, what's I guess, I'm curious about those obstacles, but also just like your overall journey as an actor and evolution.
Yeah. My my mom was a librarian, and she majored in communications and theater. And our dad was an actor at one point, living in Los Angeles, and a model. And so when you put those two together, you just get what you get.
Yeah.
So I didn't, and it's kind of like magic. And it's just like I looked at it, and I always was like, yeah, I'd be really good at that, but I don't know if I want to do that with my life. Like, it's hard, like it's not guaranteed, a future in the sense of it being secure.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that's daunting. And so, I remember being in high school, and really looking at the theater kids, and they were a bunch of freaks and weirdos that I wanted to be a part of. And so, but I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't do that. And I remember being in art class in ninth grade, and Billy Bourgeois, rest in peace, was my art teacher. I got an F my first semester in art, my freshman year, because I was talking, I wasn't doing my work, I was hyperactive, and all the reasons why I needed probably something a bit more engaging than art, at least visual art. And so, so she actually was wonderful in that she sat me down. She's like, look, this is why you failed my class. And there's no reason for you to fail my class, but I had to fail you because of this. And that is what always resonated with me and resonates with me, when someone sits you down and is like, these are the facts, and it's not about you, it's about what you're doing. And this is how I feel about it. I don't hate you, I don't dislike you. Your worth is no more or less. This is just what's going on. And when people in positions of power or authority or with knowledge can talk that way to people who can receive it, for me as one of those people, it changes everything, because I realize I'm not antagonistic against myself. It's all very plain. Just do the simple task in front of you.
Yeah.
The person doesn't have an emotional thing towards you.
Yeah.
They just laid it out, and that's a kindness. That's really the greatest kindness.
Yeah.
And so I recognized that. I saw that, and I was like, yeah, okay. I got an A the next semester. And,
Nice.
she always made a great counselor to me all the way through school. And she's like, you might want to consider doing theater though. Like, you're not a bad, artist or illustrator or drawer or whatever we're doing in class. It's freshman year, so you're doing all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to an arts high school. And, but, I feel like you probably want to go into the performing arts. It's just, and I was like, no, that's for freaks and weirdos. And she just looked at me. She's like, yeah. So of course I ignored her, and I took art the next semester, and I got a D.
Mm.
And that teacher was less communicative, and so I became plain though, and that's the lessons. These are lessons you have to learn. You'll repeat the same lesson until you learn it in a different way. Maybe half of what you learned you got before, half what you needed to know you got before, but you had to go through that again in order to experience it with that knowledge. So I was like, I don't have a really great teacher who's probably not going to give me an A this next semester and isn't intent on working with me. And I remember what she said, Miss Bourgeois said. So I just left art behind. And then went back to my studies. I had a friend who was taking a theater class, and she would help me run her lines. They were doing Uncle Vanya, a Chekhov play.
Oh,
And
nice.
it was so much fun. And I was just like, she's like, yeah, you should audition, you should do this. I was like, no. Again, resistance. No, that's not for me. I don't want to do it. Meanwhile, dying to do it. And so then though, and I think this is true for me. My high school was doing West Side Story for its senior film musical, and West Side Story was the first movie my mother bought on the giant wood paneled VCR video cassette.
Yeah.
I grew up with it. I was a little boy, and that was in our house. And
Nice.
knew all the music, knew all the words, knew a lot of choreography just because that was what we were doing in the house. And so to see that happen, I was like, I think I need to audition for this. So nice. I did, and I got cast. Oh no, actually no, I did join the theater prior to this. I was known as like, hey, that guy, and I could sing. So I auditioned for West Side Story, but that was the end. That was like, oh, this is what you're into.
No, yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
It's funny. I remember that when I was a kid. It's like I mean, people don't know, but so I grew up in Seattle. You grew up in Baton Rouge, and you would come visit in the summer. And I remember like looking at I don't know if it is the script, yeah, of West Side Story, and yeah, Altoids you introduced me to. That's like those probably will always be every time I hear West Side Story, I'm like Altoids.
That's what they're attached. I love that.
Yeah,
that's cool.
But yeah, so I think that's so cool. But so yeah, West Side Story was your
yeah. So that was a long rehearsal process, and it was something I knew well and something I was good at, and we were dancing, we were singing, we were acting, and getting killed on stage, and it was Romeo and Juliet, and it was Shakespeare, and all kinds of really a big endeavor to sample, like, for West Side Story is a good show. They're actually, the movie's getting re-released. Steven Spielberg just shot West Side Story.
Oh wow.
So, yeah, they're making it again. They won all the Oscars when it came out in 19 something, whatever it came out, and so it's good stuff. And we got to incubate in that for a long time. And I gained some lifelong friends from that, some of whom went on to Broadway, and some of whom are amazing artists to this day. And but then I graduated high school, and I was like, okay, well, I got to get serious. I'm going to college. I need to get a real degree. So let me not major in theater, because who wants to do that in Louisiana, like the LSU where I went. So let me get a real degree and get an English degree. So not very real. But I also write,
yeah.
So I got my degree in creative writing. And all the entire time I was in the theater department, I was doing show after show after show. And I did Little Shop of Horrors, which you might also remember.
I remember that, definitely, yeah.
Growing up with Orlando, these things trickle down. And so I was playing the plant, and a professor saw me in that, and they were like, hey, you're really good. Why don't you come to my summer stock theater in New York? And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. That's what you do. You do summer stock when you're in college, and you go away and you work in the professional theater, and that's how you cut your teeth and learn how to do this, which is true. Mm-hmm. So I did that in this tiny little town called Westport on Lake Champlain, like way up there in New York City. Like, and it's called the Depot Theater. And it's called the Depot Theater because it's literally in a train depot. So the train goes up from New York City to Montreal, and Westport, New York is one of the stops. And sometimes we come during the middle of the show, so the show stops. And then it resumes. It's such a perfect, like, American culture. Could not happen almost anywhere else. So, and I did another Leonard Bernstein musical called On the Town. And that was a great experience because I was working with people who had been in the New York theaters, professionals, been on Broadway, and they were like, you know what, you have what it takes. You just don't know what you're doing as a professional. You don't understand how the business works. I was like, it's true. And they're like, why don't you come down? And this is 2000, year 2000. Why don't you come down and stay with us and just audition for a week? You know, you missed the first week of school. Have to go back to school after summer. Miss the first week of school, and just stay with us for a week, see what happens in audition. So I got Backstage Magazine, which is how you kind of got auditions if you're a little actor in those days. And I booked everything I got.
Oh, wow.
Got my equity card, got regional tours, got national tours, worked, made more money than I ever had in my life, my little life. My mom was deeply upset until she started seeing that check come home. You know, I would send her to, you know, placate her. And she's like, well, I can't argue with the fact you're making money.
Yeah.
So I was on the road working with, you know, people now who are Tony nominated actors in this past couple of years. A wonderful actor named Derek Baskin was in that one of these shows with me, and he's a good friend. And yeah, I was 21 and on the road as good as it could get, you know, making money and playing around. And there was an all-black show, and you know, we were made some great friends as well, and I found my tribe, and then went back to New York City, and 9/11 happened, and there was no industry. Just very similar to what we experienced this past year, where the business just froze, even harder than it froze this past year, because the internet wasn't what it was. And so a year had passed, been out of school for a year, and I had just next semester, and school seemed like a very safe place in Louisiana. So I went back to school, and everyone was like, oh my God, you've been away, you got your equity card, you toured. So I was hot shit.
Nice.
So everyone was like, I got all this opportunity. But what had changed is that everyone was going into grad school. And I was like, and I saw people who got into grad school with my little ego-driven, comparative, low-level thinking was like, if you got into grad school, I can get into grad school. So they got into these good grad schools around the country. I then auditioned. I got into 16 grad schools.
Nice.
And many of them very, very, very good. But I chose NYU. And they gave me, the tuition was paid for. And that was a huge deal. I was going to go back to New York and work at this amazing school with these amazing teachers. And so I did. While I was there, however, it ended up not being a good fit for me. Something about the way that I'm built, and maybe that goes back to Billy Bourgeois and pedagogy, and something about the way that place is built and its processes and its faculty with some deeply flawed thinking, as relates again to race. You know, I heard all kinds of crazy things come out of my chair's mouth at the time, and other faculty there. And, you know, I certainly was, you know, not operating at my highest level. I admit that. And there's just like, I was just confused. There's just a lot of different conflicting things, and I think that they were confused by me. And so ultimately they asked me to leave, and that was really devastating because I had been on this golden path, for a long time, and I hadn't encountered that kind of setback in that way to that magnitude. And it was the darkest time of my life, I think. I remember, I'm not suicidal by any means, but at one point I was like, oh, what if you, and it, that little darkness flit across the screen, and then it's gone because I don't live in that space.
Yeah. Right.
But that was a pretty dark space to be in because my entire life had, one day you're in class, one day you have a livelihood because that's how you're living, because you're taking out loans to live and you're in school, even though your tuition's paid for. And then all that's cut away. And so now all of a sudden you're living in this apartment that you can't afford, and nobody, there really. And so I had to kind of scrape it together. And everyone was perplexed. People thought I did something wrong or what something. They're not getting the whole story. And it's hard. The hardest part is to be like, no, they didn't think I was very good. They didn't think I was an actor, literally. And I heard things from them. They were like, I've never seen you angry. Anger is a really useful thing for a young Black male actor to have. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, literally, like, I've never met anybody like you before, or I heard all kinds of like things, and none of it was very helpful, and none of it was intent on empowering me. A lot of it had an overarching agenda, which wasn't malicious, but it was less concerned about who I am and more concerned about what they perceive.
Yeah, and fitting you into a box or whatever.
Right. And I knew what boxes I had, and I was intent, I think, and this is part of the disconnect there. I'm intent always, whenever I'm in a system, and this is who I am, I'm going to figure out the system on my terms, however I want to. That means you might not necessarily do well in a grad school. You know what I'm saying? I'm teaching myself as much as you're teaching me. And that doesn't mean I'm, smarter or whatever. I like to figure out things in my own strange way, and that's how I compile information. It has always served me. I glean information about the world in this way. And I think that's very important when you're playing a character. That's kind of how I built my entire life. And there's other things attached to it, but
and I totally I feel I'm the same way. I feel like between our siblings, like you and I are probably the most similar in that respect. But I also could definitely see how in a very like prestigious established program where I'm sure there's just like monstrous egos there, how that could not, how that could cause, conflict, or people could not, not get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. And certainly people did some actions which weren't that great. And some people did amazing actions that were wonderful. And almost everybody there is the top of their game as an educator.
Nice.
And a student. And so I want to make it clear. And there's, I at one point though, it's funny, this is to that end, that was wielded against me, this equanimity that I just displayed, this credit that I'm going to give you if you're awesome and you clearly you're good at what you do, was wielded against me in that I'm trying to analyze the situation, why I'm on probation at the school, what I've done wrong, how can I improve, because again, I'm doing it on my terms. I'm not here to tick your boxes. I'm here to really be the best version of myself, but that's on my terms. And it's the school, a big part of the disconnect was that it's on their terms. And that's for most schools.
Yeah.
To be fair. So I think that's part of the challenge. But at one point we had a discussion and they were like, well, see, even he says that he could do better. And I was like, are you really like wielding my own words against me in this way? And that gets to the point of, it's not quite monstrous ego, but it's more about insecurity and security, which may be the same thing. But when I say insecurity, it's about, is there something about this person and the way we're teaching them that we may not be doing optimally? If they display then any acquiescence to the fact that they may be doing wrong, we must leap upon it to preserve ourselves, which is kind of, and so that experience was had, and there's way more. But beyond that, I covered it. and I could go into it and I unpacked it, and it was a big point of pain for my entire life for a long time. Like,
Yeah,
I was
we're
really emotional. I would almost cry. Like, I couldn't even get through the story.
mm-hmm.
And until very, very recently, actually, very recently,
Right.
in this past year or two. And that was 2005.
Oh,
So
we're
then
yeah.
I'm in New York, and I'm like, adrift. And luckily, some people, I had friends who gave me employment, who connected me with people, who gave me, there's an actor who's done quite well for himself. His name is Andre Holland. He was in my class at NYU,
Mm.
and he gave me my first promotional job working for Grand Central Marketing in New
Oh,
York.
cool.
And so if it weren't for Andre Holland, who was in Moonlight and Selma and all these other movies, you wouldn't be here doing this with Lucas. It's
Oh,
funny how,
yeah, we're in. Well, thank you.
right? So it's funny how the world works.
Yeah.
So anyway, I remember scraping and surviving in New York. You visited during
Yep.
that time.
Yeah.
Came to visit me. I had moved out of Manhattan because I couldn't afford it. I moved to Bushwick, which was uh, less of a hit place than it is nowadays. I understand that it's very gentrified.
Mm.
And so I tried to make it work. And I remember though, one year, it was April 1st. I think it was 2007, maybe 2 years after that NYU experience.
Mm-hmm.
And the snow was coming down sideways. It wasn't even coming down. It was just going across this way. I opened the window up and I was just like, oh, and my brain couldn't even handle it because I was so traumatized from the winter. I was like, oh, someone's just waxing the roof. And then I asked myself, what does that even mean? Like, you're making up things to justify the fact that giant snowflakes are whirring past your window. It's time to leave New York City. And so,
Yeah, we're in.
and I'd been struggling. And so I went home and had this dark night of the soul and tried to figure it out. But then, I got an agent down there. I got movies and commercials because in Louisiana, home meaning Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
And I stayed down there, saved up some money, did some movies, some commercials. And then I moved out to LA, lived in LA, got disenchanted with the business over time, but did some things out there as well.
Like, and for acting, you do your main focus is theater.
I would say, well, I wouldn't say that. I would say it's whatever's handy. And
yeah. Oh, word. Okay, cool.
If you're in New York City and you're in an acting program, chances are it's going to be live and you're doing theater and you're in that world.
Okay.
If you're in Louisiana and the film industry is popping, you're working the film industry. If you're in LA, you're in TV, film, and video and web stuff. That's I know the theater. It's what I grew up in. So I would say to that extent that's true. But at that point, I still didn't know what kind of actor I was and what my strengths were because I got kicked out of school. I didn't get that answer, or I was looking for somebody to give that to me when I could have probably working to figure that out myself, which is important for any artist. Like, it doesn't matter what anybody says about you, whether they're wrong or right.
Yeah.
What do you think? Because you're the one making the stuff. And so, so I was in LA, and then I just realized I had a good job working in marketing, and it's like, I don't really care if I act anymore.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, like,
yeah,
it's not bad. It's a little sad because you're like, that's why I moved here. But I'm like, well, if I'm not in LA, like, what do I do? Where do I go? And if I'm not acting here, what am I doing here? So I started looking around, and Seattle was growing up. You were, doing well, and I had family there that I had gone closer to because of living in LA over the past like 4 or 5 years at that point, going up for holidays and stuff. And so I moved to Seattle. I stayed with you for a while, lived with you, which is how we met Catherine, who made the Teferi costume, and as we moved to it. So, and the acting story is coming quickly to a close. I know I've gone on for a bit, but
it's great.
It is the biggest story of my life.
So yeah, I remember when you moved to Seattle, you were kind of like, yeah, I mean, I remember talking to you and you really being like, yeah, I'm a storyteller. So, acting, can be part of that, but it doesn't have to be. And then, so you were like, if I don't act right now, that's fine. And I feel like after being in Seattle for a little while, acting found you again almost.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Um, you know, I tried a few things. I was writing more, which was good, and I still need to write more.
Don't we
But I
all?
was waiting tables. What?
So
What's
don't
that?
we all?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was waiting tables, and found some little job and whatever here or there, and that is fine. And then I was up for this big job at Microsoft, paid really well, and I didn't get it. And so I didn't have a home and I didn't have a job. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, you're like a grown ass man, and what do you have to show for it? And so I was like, you just need to, everything you've been doing is just acting. Like, even if you're not acting, like every single gig, you're just applying your acting skills for your storytelling skills. So you need to lean into that. And that's what your future is. And you'll be happier rather than doing something else and using those skills, but not furthering your life. And it was a huge revelation. And then I also figured out, like, I think you're a classical actor, Arlando. I think that's your lane. So that gets back to your theater point. Generally the classics are going to be on stage, generally. And so understanding what that meant for me, what home is, and then home meaning my home base as an artist, and then where I can go diverge off to that. Like, oh, well, I can sing, or I can be in this film, or I can do that. But I'm slightly contouring my home to fit into this slot. Now that I know where home is, it's a lot easier to work because I know how I approach things and from what my base is. And that took a lot of time to figure out. So knowing that, I was like waiting to audition for a classical theater company. So Seattle Shakespeare had some auditions. I auditioned. The woman, Amy Thone, who's an amazing actor and casting director, saw me audition, and she said some very nice things. And I basically told her, like, you have to cast me. You can't say all these amazing things about me. And then after this audition, cast me. And she did, to her credit. And I've had the pleasure of working with her a couple of times. Nice. And so I'm eternally grateful for her. And I think I embarrassed her by saying, if it wasn't for you, Amy, I wouldn't be working. But fast forward now to today, where I've worked a lot in this town.
Yeah.
And, I'm rejoining the Actors Union right now. Nice. I have work again in the future. And I know what kind of artist I am, and all the obstacle of grad school and all the other things that have come along the way are what made that clearer. That obstacle became the vehicle. And sometimes you want to start that engine faster if you can. That help, know what you can, get help and figure out your shit if you can. But I love where I'm at. I love the experience I have. It has really girded me. It has really strengthened me. I know how I approach my work. I know what I bring to the table. And if I get a job or I don't, it's fine, because I know how good I am and I know what I do well, and I know how I can improve.
Nice.
So yeah, that's where I'm at right now. This past year has been really good for me. During the pandemic, and I was like, you got to get busy. So I started making a documentary about Othello, which I had just been cast in this past year. I got cast in show after show after show, many of which are virtual. Nice. This past year, which is wonderful. And yeah, I feel like I have a wealth of opportunity ahead of me, and I just need to reach out and get it. I'm nervous about it right now because I'm entering to a new phase of reach as an artist. Seattle is very comfortable, but there are points near regionally that I'm eyeballing that have responded. So
nice.
How do I do that?
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah. So, a year and a half ago, I remember being really excited about going to see some of your shows, and they all got, canceled. And then, so I'm like, oh, Orlando's, out of work. And then next I come visit you like a couple weeks later, and you're just like, yeah, I'm fully booked for, for the foreseeable future, like too many projects. And so some projects I was even excited about that you kind of had to turn down or be like, hey, this is not not where I want to focus right now. And so yeah, do you see that as like common, or is that as far as like the state of like acting in theater and movies and TV shows, or what do you see for the next like year or so, couple of years, 5 years? I guess how do you think the pandemic will shape
No,
that? Do you think
I
it'll?
think I think the internet is king.
Mm,
I
hmm
think this level of connection, you and I mean, we live in the same area, but we're
hmm
talking to each other, and I could be there in theory, but we
Yeah.
for very reason, I have a meeting in like 30 minutes, and we have things to do.
Mm,
But the nature of the world is that our connectivity and the requirements thereof are, are demands that we be on the internet,
yeah, we're in.
and
Yeah, and
so
like TikTok is another one where it's like it's a new platform in some ways
yeah,
because it's like a minute long. And
yeah,
it's like people's or less, like people's attention span is so much shorter now that it's like you have to almost like get to the goods like immediately.
yeah, and that's a good lesson for a storyteller.
Hmm
Um, I kind of buck against that, but there's a way to go about it and navigate that. That's for another day. But
hmm
the point is, as far as industry and the business, the pandemic was a great leveler.
hmm
All things became more equal.
hmm
Opportunity, work, and coupled with the social unrest of this past year and the political unrest that we've had prior, and all these other things, we entered this moment of and I feel the window closing
hmm
consciousness about how we're operating, what is fair. And this goes for politically, judiciously, interpersonally. We entered into this space, which I hope we can hold on to more and explore
hmm
more, of how am I doing this? How is it best and efficient? And the internet is a big part of that. And
hmm
so that goes again, just beyond the business, but how we live life. And so, but in terms of the business and you know it became a lot more open for a lot of people.
hmm
And you can't. Theater's been around for 4,000 years, maybe longer. Ever since
Yeah.
anybody told a story, then this happened. I went here. That's a
hmm
story. So that's never going away. But the internet is the change because we had to stay at home. So that's a really exciting space. The way that information is being changed, the way major motion pictures are being dispersed, the greatest stories that we share as a culture, as a people, as a race of humans. All that's changed because of this past year.
No, yeah.
So, and then you talk about TikTok, it's, and again, Teferi is an outgrowth of that.
hmm
The documentary, The Othello Project, which I'm doing, is an outgrowth of that. We're in this really fertile, fruitful time. And I am hopeful we can learn from that
hmm
and grow and continue to grow. I think the old ways are fast approaching. I think the systems want to reassert themselves.
hmm
But I also feel that some of what we experience is also entrenched. So we're going
hmm
to see how that plays out. Um, but yes, expect, I believe, a huge outgrowth
hmm
of new ways to tell stories.
So what I would probably wrap up pretty soon. And yeah, we might there's a few other topics,
Yeah,
mainly like living downtown, as a, Black person, and, protests and
yeah. You led with acting,
unrest. And
so there I go.
yeah, no, that's great. Like, yeah, we can definitely talk again at some point. But I guess what advice would you have to someone who's a storyteller and like doesn't really know like how to tell their story, or someone who's interested in acting, or like what if like you were maybe you were like, say if you were 18 right now and living in this world, like what advice would you give to yourself?
um, find people you admire and trust and cleave to them.
Mm,
Um, I'm at the point where I've been doing this for 23 years
mm,
professionally,
mm,
off and on, but mostly 23 years. And there are people who I look up to who are 23 years past me,
mm,
or more or less, but they're further along in their journey. And I love being in the room with them. I frequently say I want to be the dumbest person in the room
mm,
because
mm.
I want to learn. I
Yeah.
want to I want to get more skills. And I want to observe and get better at what I do through these people who have walked further along their path than I. At the same time, there's an 18-year-old version of me who I'm in the room with right now, who looks at me and is like, hey, I got a phone call from a young actor. What do I do? We have a cousin actually who wants to be an actor, and Jacob, and I talked to him, and I've been mentoring him, giving him advice. So
Nice.
The key is to do what Jacob is doing, and to do what I do when I look up at these people who are further along, and place yourself in proximity to people who are established and know what they're doing, and who you trust. That's what I recommend. You can learn a lot just by listening and,
nice.
and being in the room with people who have experience.
Nice. And then kind of along those lines, something I have a friend, Donald, who's he's a dancer, filmmaker, really a storyteller, in his own right. But his episode of the podcast just aired on Sunday. So yeah, it's on YouTube and on all the podcast platforms. But I asked him if he has any book recommendations, and yeah, he had some good ones. I'm going to connect you guys because I think I've talked about him before. But anyway, yeah. So do you have any book recommendations, just in general, or anything that's like really blown your mind recently, or just cool books or audiobooks or websites, or
Gosh, that's now that I wish I had prepared for. All of a sudden you go blank. But let's see. In terms of, I'll go over some of the things we discussed today. So the theater world, acting and art, or in the business, whatever, and making theater. There's a book called The Empty Space by Peter Brook. It's important for anybody really to read. It'll teach you a lot. It's one of those books that makes your heart beat faster, especially as an actor. When you read it, you're like, oh, the secrets of the universe are being unfolded to me. Like it's a very slim volume, and it just kind of gets cut straight to the chase and gives you a very high level functioning attitude towards the work, which I really appreciate. But at the same time, giving you very granular examples. I love it. There's a wonderful woman in the same vein named Patsy Rodenberg, who I really love. Patsy is an amazing voice and speech teacher, but she's got a very high level ethos and approach. And there's a wonderful video called Why I Do Theater, which you can find on YouTube. Patsy Rodenberg TED Talk, maybe 7 minutes long. And she goes into a couple of examples of why she does theater, and it's about humanity and connecting. And we also talked about fantasy and wizard stuff. So I would recommend, there's an amazing book. Couple books I'll touch on, a book named Tigana, which not many people know. It's by Guy Gabriel Kay. It's just a beautiful volume. It'll come up later in our lives, I guarantee it. You'll be like, I remember in 6/15/2021, Arlando said Tigana, and now it's a movie everyone knows. This book is a beautiful book. It got written in 1990. I don't even want to get into it. It's just worth your time if you need a good fantasy novel. On the same token, you should read, not you, but one, should read some Ursula K. Le Guin, who is one of my favorite authors. If I can be a proponent for either of those, that'd be great. Something that else outside of that's blown my mind. I watched a really good TV series called Giri Haji, GIRI /HAJI. And it's still sitting with me. It's really beautiful. So those are my recommendations.
Nice. Yeah, I'll have to check those out. Yeah, we'll flash them on the screen. And then one just from our conversation, one book that I'm actually reading or listening to right now on Audible is Tribe of Mentors by Tim Ferriss. And it's like just short life advice from like some of the most successful people on the planet. And then Tools of Titans is another one of his. And then actually this weekend I went, speaking of acting, I saw In the Heights in theaters. It's funny, I was like, oh, I have a movie a gift card. I want to see a movie. I hadn't even, for some reason, somehow I hadn't heard of the film before. And so I looked it up, that one was playing. So I'm like, oh, this is, and it was like other violent movies and horror films like there. So I was like, well, this seems cool. And then I looked it up, it's like 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, once I was really impressed. I liked it. Even with the high ratings, I liked it more than I thought. And
Yeah.
it was like highly stimulating. Like afterwards, I had to like kind of just like sit and,
Well, it's a musical, man. Like
but
if they're hot and they're good, they're frequently the most visceral forms of storytelling, because you're getting hit musically, you're getting hit visually, you're getting hit emotionally, and they're all happening and dancing. And it's all a lot, you know.
Yeah.
And so when it's firing well, it's very hard to resist. And that's a sweet show that comes from Lin-Manuel Miranda's heart. And so yeah, I'm very happy. I remember when that show first came out in New York. I was in New York and I was working with a couple of actors, and that was their first Broadway show.
Oh wow.
And this 2007, 2008, maybe 2007. And I was working on a project, and they were just they had this beautiful glow, and it's a show about Black and brown people. And that these are the young artists I was working with at that time, and it's just so beautiful to see 13 years later, if my math is right. And so to see it come to life for the world, and to hear you talk about it, it's lovely. It's beautiful.
Nice. Well, yeah, that's awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much. So we'll definitely have links to your website and social media in the description. Do you just want to say your website again real quick?
Yeah, it's just www.arlandosmith.com, ARLANDOSMITH.com.
Cool. Awesome. Well, yeah, again, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll talk to you soon. I love you so much, bro. Yeah, thank you, everyone. And yeah, take it easy.
Thanks for watching this episode from Appropriate Culture. If you want to watch other episodes, make sure to make your way to appropriateculture.com. You can also hang out with us in other social media platforms. They're all in the link in the description. And aside from that, if you want to listen to the podcast on other platforms like Audible, Spotify, any of those, you can also find us there as well. Link in the description. Take it easy, guys. Have a good day.